They told me if I didn't let my unemployed brother move into my penthouse, the one I worked years to afford, I'd be tearing the family apart. Then at his birthday dinner, my own mother slapped me in front of everyone because I finally said no. That was the moment I knew enough was enough. So I did something that shocked them all, and I've never looked back. You want to know what real revenge looks like? Keep watching. Sarah, 33, is still in shock over what transpired at my brother Callan's birthday celebration last month. I never anticipated the family tempest that centered around the penthouse I had fought so hard to earn as a software engineer. When I got there and saw everyone's expressions, that mix of judgment and expectation I've known since I was a kid, I should have known something wasn't right. Despite being unemployed all the time, Callan, who is 37 years old, has always been the golden child. I felt that same knot in my gut tighten as I entered my parents' home while holding his pricey gift. Please let me know where you're watching from before I continue this narrative. Hit the like and subscribe buttons, leave your location in the comments, and let's get started on the family drama that made all the difference. The pattern was set early on in our middle-class Portland area where we grew up. My parents, Ambrose and Alora, had always desired a son, and Callan was the firstborn. 3 years later, I arrived as the daughter they were never quite sure how to handle. Despite having a small lawn and small bedrooms, our childhood home was very pleasant, but the mental terrain was far more uneven. Despite evidence to the contrary, our parents believed Callan could do no wrong. My mother used to sigh and say school just isn't set up for creative minds like his. My father would laugh when he shattered the neighbor's window while playing baseball indoors after being ordered not to, and he would call it boys being boys. In the meantime, I became aware of computers in 4th grade and discovered that I was naturally gifted at comprehending how they operated. I was captivated by early programming and would stay after school to use the computer lab. "That's nice, dear," my mother would nod when I brought home straight A's, then return her focus to whatever difficulty Callan was going through. The disparity had only become more pronounced by high school. I became a member of a robotics club, and my team won a regional competition. Callan had a football game that day, but he was mostly on the bench, so my folks didn't go. My father looked up from the TV when I brought the award home and remarked, "Just don't get too wrapped up in that computer stuff. Boys don't like girls who are too smart." I submitted applications to 12 colleges and was awarded scholarships by 8 of them. Because of State University's outstanding computer science curriculum, I decided to enroll there. My parents made no educational contributions. My mother clarified we need to save for Callan's future because college is expensive. I therefore worked 3 jobs: weekend retail, coffee shop morning shifts, and late-night data entry at a nearby company. Meanwhile, our parents paid for Callan's tuition at a private university. After the first semester, he left because he felt the instructors didn't comprehend his preferred method of studying. They gave him a sympathetic nod and covered the cost of his second try at a different school. He decided it wasn't the right atmosphere after being there for a little longer, nearly a year. The same pattern was followed by the 3rd college. I minored in business and mathematics and received honors for my computer science degree. Callan called to ask for their assistance with a problem with his landlord and past due rent, so my parents went early to attend my graduation. I made just enough money in my first job, which was entry-level at a small computer company, to pay off my student loans and rent for a modest studio apartment. In order to expand my portfolio, I worked 60-hour weeks, taught myself new programming languages at night, and contributed to open-source projects. Callan cycled among occupations that lasted no more than a few months while living at home during those years. Employment in restaurants ended because the hours didn't work with my creative schedule, office employment ended because the corporate environment was stifling my potential, and retail jobs ended because the manager had it out for me. Our parents were understanding of every setback. My father used to say he just hasn't found his calling yet. At the age of 28, my mother would cook for him and do his washing, adding, "He's too bright for these menial jobs." During my visits for holidays and sporadic Sunday dinners, I always heard about Callan's most recent endeavor, which was certain to succeed in the near future. If it weren't so annoying, the pattern would have been funny because it was so predictable. I got a job at Horizon Technologies, one of Seattle's top software businesses, when I was 26. I was finally able to make progress on my college loans and move into a better apartment thanks to the pay increase. I informed my folks over the phone. My mother said, "That's nice, honey," while she was preoccupied. "Did you hear Callan is thinking of starting his own business? He's got such an entrepreneurial spirit." The company, which was financed by a loan from our parents that nobody really thought would be paid back, ended up being an online resale of limited edition sneakers. Before moving on to his next passion project, it lasted for a total of 3 months. Like a plant moving from shade to sunlight, my emotional distance from my family evolved organically. I joined a reading club and hiking groups, developed friends at work, and connected with people who genuinely applauded rather than minimized my accomplishments. We met at a Women in Tech conference, and Kaya quickly became my best friend. She was raised in a loving household and was at first taken aback by the tales I told about mine. "That's not normal, Sarah," she'd say to me. "You know that, right? Parents are supposed to be proud when their kids achieve something." I was aware of her correctness. However, the abnormal had become normalized due to years of conditioning. I kept in touch with my family, but I guarded my heart by setting strict limits on my time and energy and lowering expectations. I had created a life that seemed truly mine by the time I was 30. I had saved a good deal of money for my dream of owning a home, and I was advancing at Horizon by mentoring younger developers. Even though Callan had a history of being careless, he was still the hub of my parents' world at 33 and still lived at home in between jobs. I had no idea that my increasing success would soon serve as the impetus for the most agonizing family conflict of my life. Everything changed when I was 30. I received a significant pay raise and ownership in Horizon Technologies when I was promoted to senior software architect. My dream purchase, a penthouse apartment in downtown Seattle, was finally within my reach after years of prudent saving and calculated professional decisions. The choice was not made hastily. I spoke with financial advisors, conducted months of market research, and ensured that the investment matched my long-term objectives. When a 2-bedroom penthouse on the 32nd story of the Cascade building was the ideal location, and I felt right once that it was meant to be mine. With floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, the Space Needle, and on clear days, the beautiful outline of Mount Rainier, the views alone were worth the price tag. A gourmet kitchen featuring marble countertops and top-of-the-line appliances flowed from the open-concept living space. The bathroom in the master suite had a soaking tub that was oriented to take in the city lights, and there was a walk-in closet. I turned the second bedroom into a home office, complete with a standing desk that faces the water and built-in bookcases. For me, the penthouse symbolized something deeper than its utilitarian value. It was concrete evidence of what I had fought for, a room that was wholly mine, created with my tastes in mind and without sacrificing anything. This was my haven after being raised in a household where my needs were never prioritized. Another level of luxury was provided by the building's amenities, which included a rooftop garden with grilling stations, a modern fitness center, round-the-clock concierge service, and a residence lounge that was ideal for those days when I wanted to work from home but still wanted a change of scenery. The first person I showed the home to after moving in was Kaya. As the sun sank over the Olympic Mountains, we toasted on the balcony with the champagne she brought. She chimed in, "You earned every square inch of this place," as she pressed her glass to mine. "I hope you never forget that." For a brief time, I wished my family could be as truly delighted for me as my friend was. Nevertheless, after I was situated, I invited them to a housewarming meal in the hopes that our relationship would change after they saw how successful I was. Cooking my mother's favorite salmon recipe and setting the table with new crockery I had bought for the event took up my entire day. I also made sure Callan's favorite beer was in the fridge and purchased my father's favorite scotch to offer after supper. They were 45 minutes late. "Alora," my mother remarked, "this building must have quite the homeowners association fee," without even looking at the meticulously set table. "When you're just one person, it seems wasteful." Ambrose, my dad, went directly to the windows. "Very ostentatious place. I hope you're not taking on more than you can handle. The market might shift at any moment." Callan walked around the room, opening closet doors and cabinets without asking, as though he was checking things out. He mumbled, "Must be nice," loud enough for me to hear. Some people simply have it all. Trying to keep the talk on neutral ground, I bit my tongue and served dinner. My father nodded absently when I discussed my recent promotion, but my mother spent the whole of the meal discussing Callan's most recent job interview, which seemed promising, and how the hiring manager would be fortunate to have someone with his diverse experience. These days, businesses use elaborate titles. To reach a senior position in my era, you had to put in decades of work. Callan asked, "So, what's a place like this cost anyway?" while I was showing them the view from the balcony after dessert. "You must be making a lot of money." My mother continued, "Yes, Sarah," before I could sidestep the inappropriate question. "We do question if you're managing your finances sensibly. Family should come before material belongings, you know." No one made it clear that night, but the suggestion was there. Shortly after they departed, with my mother hardly tasting the dessert I had spent hours making. The following morning, Kaya called to inquire about the outcome. She sighed as I told her about the night. Classic. They are unable to applaud you since it draws attention to Callan's status as an adult who still acts like a youngster. Sarah, it's not about you. It has to do with their refusal to accept reality. Even more awkward was the Sunday supper at my folks' house the next day. Callan was between opportunities again, according to my mother, who gave me a stern look. Seeing his younger sister in such a fancy place when he can hardly afford his car payment is really difficult for him. Family is supposed to look out for each other, Sarah, my father said. Keep it in mind. Throughout the ensuing months, these remarks intensified. The idea that Callan was somehow insulted by my success and that I owed it to the family to share my blessings was a recurring topic at every family get-together. My aunt questioned in front of everyone around Thanksgiving, wouldn't it be lonely to be alone in that large penthouse? Sarah, I have no doubt that Callan would value having a comfortable place to stay while he works things out. My uncle cornered me in the kitchen during Christmas. Your brother truly needs a vacation, you know. For a man to feel valued, he needs his own space. Have you considered allowing him to remain with you for a time? After all, you have that extra room. I tried my best to politely sidestep these recommendations, but the pressure was mounting. Callan, however, grew more arrogant and would say things like, checking out my view, or testing that fancy shower, anytime the penthouse was brought up. When I invited Kaya to a small dinner party I was throwing for my coworkers, the situation became tense. That afternoon, my folks gave me a call to see if they might drop off anything. I agreed against my better judgment. Callan was with them, obviously planning to stay. In front of my supervisor and coworkers, my mother started criticizing my appetizer arrangement right away, while Callan helped himself to the wine I had chosen for the occasion. He informed one of my coworkers, Leora, that his sister enjoyed acting as hostess in her opulent apartment. However, she forgets her origins. Through the evening, I was able to avoid making a scene. But after everyone had gone, I went up to them. That was totally out of place. I'm holding an event for work, and you can't just come up without an invitation. My mom appeared injured. Sarah, we are family. Invitations are not necessary for family. Callan grinned and continued, besides, it's not like you don't have the space. At that moment, I understood that unless I took a strong stance, the boundary violations would persist. I started turning down Sunday dinners more often, saying I had work to do. During our phone conversations, I stopped disclosing personal information. To preserve my hard-won tranquility, I established a buffer. However, the strain inside the family was intensifying toward a clash that would alter everything. And the tipping point that none of us anticipated would be Callan's impending 35th birthday celebration. Callan lost his job once more, this time at the insurance company owned by his friend's father, 3 weeks prior to his birthday. He was given a job that was almost handed to him. After only 2 months, he was fired due to irregular attendance and performance, although my parents said that the boss was alarmed by Callan's natural leadership qualities. My mother phoned me the day after he was fired. Her voice carried that usual air of expectation as she said, Sarah, your brother is going through a rough patch again. Knowing where this was going, I said, I'm sorry to hear that. Since his birthday is next month and he has an upcoming car payment, I was wondering if you could lend a hand at least until he finds another job. You are aware of how difficult it is to find work these days. I could have recited this precise speech with her because I had heard it so many times. I told myself it was a one-time occurrence, but I paid Callan $300 for his car payment against my better judgment. My father called 3 days later. You know how these landlords can be, and your brother's rent is due. No sympathy for a short-term failure. Just for once, could you see him? Another $1,200 was moved to Callan's account from mine. It was the last time, I told myself. However, the requests continued. Money for groceries. Utilities. A brand new interview suit. They were all presented as transitory, necessary, and my family's responsibility. I had given Callan around $3,000 in loans by the time his birthday drew close, which we all knew would never be paid back. I told my coworker Leora about the circumstance during a lunch break at work. As we sat in the business cafeteria, I told her, it feels like I'm being punished for being responsible. They expect me to make up for Callan's shortcomings the more I succeed. Leora, from a big family with good relationships, shook her head. Sarah, you have to establish limits. Definite, unambiguous borders. If not, this pattern will keep happening until you are at your very end. I repeated the chant that had been ingrained in me since I was a young child, but they're family. Families encourage one another's development, Leora answered. They don't undermine it. They are taking advantage of you and helping your brother, not showing love. I was aware of her correctness. However, the fear of confrontation was a result of years of indoctrination. Nevertheless, after Callan's birthday, I made the decision to start establishing boundaries. No need to create drama during a family celebration, I argued. I went shopping for Callan's present the weekend before the celebration. Even though I was frustrated, I secretly hoped that a considerate gift might somehow close the widening gap between us. I wanted to make an unquestionable gesture, so I chose an expensive watch, much more than I should have given the recent loans. My phone was buzzing nonstop that night with texts from different family members. Remember Callan's favorite chocolate cake, my mother said. Additionally, dress nicely. Your aunt is traveling from Portland. From my dad, for once, make sure you arrive on time. Your mother cares about this. From Rowan, my cousin, I hope to see you at the celebration. We must catch up. It will be nice to see the entire family together, said my uncle. At Sunday dinners you are missed. The subtext was obvious. My absence had been recognized and discussed, and attendance was required. In an attempt to reintegrate the stray member, the family structure was using its power. Anxiety knotted in my gut as I woke up the morning before the party. I took extra care to get dressed, picking out a conservative blue dress that would avoid comments about showing off or dressing fancy. I wore minimum makeup, wore my hair simply, and purposefully left the majority of my jewelry at home. I was navigating harmful dynamics, and these calculations, this meticulous curation of my look to minimize criticism, spoke volumes. I practiced neutral answers to the expected queries about my work, my penthouse, and my romantic life while I wrapped Callan's gift in silver paper. It took 40 minutes to go to my folks' suburban house. Every mile felt like a step backward for me, the self-assured professional giving way to the perpetual second-best kid, desperate for approval that never materialized. After parking between my cousin's sedan and my uncle's SUV, I took a moment to gather my thoughts before getting inside. When I got there, the house was already full. Callan was being celebrated by my parents' friends, aunts, uncles, and cousins. A happy 35th birthday banner was draped over the dining room entry, and balloons adorned the living room. I was stopped at the door by my mother. She replied, "At last you're here." Even though I arrived exactly on schedule. "Place your present beside the others on the table." My mother added, "Your father and uncle are in the backyard with Callan." I walked around the home and greeted family members I hadn't seen in months. The majority were courteous but aloof, as though they weren't sure how to interact with me now that I had violated the unwritten family norms by becoming too successful. As I walked by, Aunt grabbed my arm. "Are you still getting along well in that penthouse?" she inquired, sounding as though my decision to live there was a betrayal of my background. "It's ideal for me," I said plainly, stepping aside before she could ask any more questions. "Thinks she's better than the rest of us now with her fancy job and expensive apartment," I heard Celine, a friend of my mother, say in the kitchen. Callan, meantime, is unable to get a break. I pretended not to listen, concentrating instead on setting up the tray of vegetables I had brought. The pattern was recognizable. Callan's failings were presented as bad luck, and my successes as conceit. Dinner tables and chairs were set up in the backyard. Holding court with our father, uncle, and two of our male cousins, Callan stood sipping a beer. He gave me a quick nod when I arrived, then went on to describe how his old boss couldn't handle someone with real ideas. I couldn't help but be amazed at the two worlds we lived in as I sat on the edge of the crowd. According to Callan's story, which our parents avidly supported, he was a misunderstood genius who was constantly harmed by unjust circumstances and envious authority individuals. According to the version backed by objective data, he was a persistently poor adult who was made possible by parents who couldn't stand to watch him suffer the consequences. I had no idea that these conflicting stories would come together in a matter of hours and fundamentally change the dynamics of our family. All of it, the birthday cake, the gifts, the seemingly ordinary family meal, was only a precursor to a conflict that had been simmering for years. Everyone gathered around the long dining table, with an additional folding table set up to handle the excess, and dinner was served at 6 o'clock. Callan's favorite foods were all prepared by my mother. Green bean casserole, garlic mashed potatoes, roast beef, and bread from the nearby bakery. I was positioned securely away from Callan at the head of the table, between my father's co-worker Jim and cousin Rowan. The discussion centered mostly on Callan's newfound jobless luck and swept about me. Sarah, 32, is still in disbelief at what happened at last month's birthday celebration for my brother Callan. The family storm that centered on the penthouse I had worked so hard to achieve as a software engineer was something I never expected. I should have realized something wasn't right when I arrived and saw everyone's faces. That mixture of expectation and judgment I've known since I was a child. Callan, 35, has always been the golden child. Even though he is constantly unemployed. As I carried his expensive gift into my parents' house, I felt the familiar knot in my stomach tighten. Before I continue my story, please let me know where you are viewing from. Press like and subscribe buttons, indicate where you are in the comments, and let's begin discussing the family drama that changed everything. We were raised in a middle-class neighborhood of Portland, where the pattern was established early on. Callan was the firstborn child, and my parents, Ambrose and Elora, had always wanted a son. I came 3 years later as the daughter they could never quite figure out how to deal with. Our childhood home was quite comfortable, even though it had modest bedrooms and a small lawn, but the mental landscape was much more uneven. Our parents thought Callan could do no wrong, even in the face of evidence to the contrary. My father would laugh when he broke the neighbor's window while playing baseball indoors despite being told not to, and he would refer to it as boys being boys. My mother used to sigh and say, "School just isn't set up for creative minds like his." Meanwhile, I learned about computers in 4th grade and found that I had a natural ability to understand how they worked. I used to stay after school to use the computer lab since I was fascinated by early programming. When I brought home straight A's, my mother would nod and then turn back to whatever challenge Callan was facing. "That's nice, dear," she would say. By high school, the difference had only gotten worse. My team won a regional tournament and I joined a robotics club. My parents didn't go because Callan was primarily on the bench during his football game that day. When I brought the prize home, my father said, "Just don't get too wrapped up in that computer stuff. Boys don't like girls who are too smart." He was looking up from the TV. I applied to 12 universities and 8 of them gave me scholarships. I chose to enroll at State University because of its excellent computer science program. My parents didn't contribute to my education. The explanation from my mother was, "We need to save for Callan's future because college is expensive." I thus worked 3 jobs. Late-night data entry at a local corporation, coffee shop morning shifts, and weekend retail. In the meantime, Callan's tuition at a private institution was covered by our parents. He thought that the teachers didn't understand his preferred study style. Therefore he departed after the first semester. They offered him a sympathetic nod and paid for him to try again at another school. After a little more time, about a year, he concluded it wasn't the proper atmosphere. The 3rd college followed the same trend. I graduated with honors in computer science with a business and math minor. My parents left early to attend my graduation because Callan called to ask for their help with a situation involving his landlord and past due rent. My first work, an entry-level position at a tiny computer company, paid barely enough to cover the rent for a small studio apartment and my student loans. I put in 60-hour work weeks, learned new computer languages at night, and contributed to open-source projects in order to increase my portfolio. During those years, Callan lived at home and alternated between jobs that lasted no more than a few months. The reasons for leaving jobs in restaurants were the hours didn't work with my creative schedule. The corporate environment was stifling my potential, and the manager had it out for me. Mission offices also ceased. Every setback was tolerated by our parents. "He just hasn't found his calling yet," my father used to say. My mother used to cook for him and do his laundry when he was 28, saying, "He's too bright for these menial jobs." On my occasional Sunday meals and vacation visits, I was always informed of Callan's latest venture, which was bound to be successful soon. The pattern was so predictable that it would have been comical if it weren't so aggravating. At age 26, I was hired by Horizon Technologies, one of the leading software companies in Seattle. The pay raise allowed me to finally relocate into a better apartment and make headway on my undergraduate loans. I called my parents and told them, "That's nice, honey," my mother declared as she was distracted. "Did you hear Callan is thinking of starting his own business? He's got such an entrepreneurial spirit." The business was a limited edition sneaker internet resale, funded by a loan from our parents that no one truly believed would be repaid. It lasted 3 months in total until he moved on to his next passion project. My emotional distance from my family developed naturally, much like a plant that transitions from shade to sunlight. I made acquaintances at work, joined hiking and reading clubs, and made connections with individuals who truly celebrated my achievements rather than downplayed them. Kaya became my best friend right away after we met at a women in tech conference. She grew up in a nice home and was initially surprised by the stories I spoke about mine. "That's not normal, Sarah," she would remark to me. "You know that, right? Parents are supposed to be proud when their kids achieve something." I knew that she was right. However, years of conditioning had normalized the anomalous. I maintained communication with my family, but I protected my heart by decreasing expectations and imposing rigorous time and energy constraints. By the time I was 30, I had built a life that felt like mine. I was progressing at Horizon by mentoring younger developers, and I had saved a significant amount of money for my ambition of home ownership. At 33, Callan continued to reside at home between jobs despite his past reckless behavior, making him the center of my parents' universe. I had no idea that the most painful family dispute of my life would soon be sparked by my growing success. When I turned 30, everything changed. When I was promoted to senior software architect at Horizon Technologies, I received a sizable compensation increase as well as ownership. After years of careful saving and well-considered professional choices, I was finally able to afford my dream purchase, a penthouse condo in downtown Seattle. It was not a snap decision. I completed months of market research, talked to financial consultants, and made sure the investment aligned with my long-term goals. I immediately sensed that a 2-bedroom penthouse on the 32nd floor of the Cascade building was destined to be mine. It was the perfect position. The price tag was justified by the views alone, which included floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Elliott Bay, the Space Needle, and on clear days, the stunning contour of Mount Rainier. The open-concept living area flowed into a gourmet kitchen with marble countertops and the best appliances. The master suite included a walk-in closet and a bathroom with a soaking tub that was angled to enjoy the city lights. I converted the second bedroom into a home office, replete with built-in bookcases and a standing desk facing the water. The penthouse represented more to me than just its practical utility. It served as tangible proof of what I had battled for, a place that was mine, designed with my preferences in mind and without compromising anything. After growing up in a home where my needs were never given priority, this was my refuge. The building's amenities, which included a rooftop garden with grilling stations, a state-of-the-art fitness center, 24-hour concierge service, and a residence lounge that was perfect for days when I wanted to work from home but still wanted a change of scenery, offered an additional level of luxury. After I moved in, Kaya was the first person I showed the house to. We drank with the champagne she brought on the balcony as the sun set over the Olympic Mountains. "You earned every square inch of this place," she added, pressing her glass against mine. "I hope you never forget that." I wished for a moment that my family could be as genuinely happy for me as my friend was. However, I asked them to a housewarming dinner when I was situated, hoping that if they saw how successful I was, our relationship would improve. I spent the entire day preparing my mother's favorite salmon dish and arranging the table using brand new plates I had purchased for the occasion. In addition, I bought my father's favorite scotch to serve after dinner and made sure Callan preferred beer was in the refrigerator. Their tardiness was 45 minutes. "This building must have quite the homeowners association fee," my mother Alora said, ignoring the finely arranged table. "It seems wasteful when you're just one person." My father, Ambrose, went straight to the windows. "The market could change at any time, so I hope you're not taking on more than you can manage. It's a very pricey area." Callan seemed to be checking things out as he moved around the room, opening cabinets and closet doors without asking. I could hear him murmuring, "Must be nice, some people just have it all." I bit my tongue and served supper, trying to keep the conversation neutral. My mother spent the entire meal talking about Callan's most recent job interview, which appeared promising, and how the hiring manager would be lucky to have someone with his diverse experience. My father nodded absently when I mentioned my recent promotion. Businesses now employ fancy titles. In my time, it took decades of struggle to get to a senior position. "So, what's a place like this cost anyway?" Callan questioned. "You must be really wealthy," I said as I showed them the view from the balcony following dessert. Before I could avoid the improper question, my mother went on, "Yes, Sarah, we do wonder if you're handling your money well. Family should come before material possessions, you know." The idea was there, but no one made it plain that night, and they left shortly after, my mother barely savoring the dessert I had spent hours preparing. Kaya sighed as I told her about the night and called the next morning to ask how it had gone. Classic. They can't cheer you on since it highlights Callan's status as an adult who still behaves like a child. It's not about you, Sarah. Their inability to accept reality is the reason behind this. The Sunday dinner at my parents' house the next day was even more awkward. Callan was between opportunities again, my mother said, but she glared at me. Seeing his younger sister in such a fancy place when he can hardly afford his car payment is really difficult for him. Family is supposed to look out for each other, Sarah, declared my dad. Remember it. These comments grew more intense over the next few months. At every family gathering, the notion that Callan was somehow offended by my success and that I owed it to the family to share my blessings kept coming up. Wouldn't it be lonely to be alone in that large penthouse? Sarah, I have no doubt that Callan would value having a comfortable place to stay while he works things out, my aunt asked in front of everyone around Thanksgiving. At Christmas, I was cornered in the kitchen by my uncle. You know your brother really needs a vacation. A man needs his own space to feel appreciated. Have you thought about letting him stay with you for a while? You have that extra space. Callan became more conceited and would say things like, checking out my view, or testing that fancy shower whenever the penthouse was mentioned, but I did my best to politely avoid these suggestions, but the pressure was growing. The situation became uncomfortable when I asked Kaya to a little dinner party I was hosting for my coworkers, and I agreed against my better judgment when my parents called me that afternoon to ask if they might drop off anything. Callan, clearly intending to stay, was with them. My mother immediately began critiquing my snack arrangement in front of my boss and coworkers, while Callan drank the wine I had selected for the event. But she forgets her origins, he said Leora, one of my coworkers, about his sister's fondness for playing hostess in her lavish apartment. I managed to stay out of the spotlight throughout the evening, but I approached them after everyone had left. That was completely inappropriate. You must receive an invitation before you can attend the work event I'm hosting. My mother looked hurt. We are family, Sarah, and family does not require invitations. Besides, Callan added with a smile, it's not like you don't have the space. I realized then that the boundary violations would continue unless I took a firm stand. I began to decline Sunday dinners more frequently. Citing business obligations, I stopped sharing personal information on the phone, and I created a buffer to protect my hard-earned peace of mind. But tensions inside the family were building toward a confrontation that would change everything, and the tipping point that none of us saw coming would be Callan's upcoming 35th birthday party. 3 weeks before his birthday, Callan lost his job again, this time at his friend's father's insurance company, where he was assigned to a position that was almost handed to him. He was sacked after just 2 months because of his inconsistent performance and attendance, but according to my parents, the manager was concerned about Callan's natural leadership qualities. The day after he was dismissed, my mother called me. Sarah, your brother is going through a rough patch again. She stated with that familiar tone of expectancy. Being aware of the direction this was taking, I answered, I'm sorry to hear that. You know how hard it is to get work these days, so I was wondering if you might help him, at least until he finds another job, because his birthday is next month and he has an imminent car payment. I had heard this exact speech so many times that I could have recited it with her. Despite my better judgment, I sent Callan $300 for his car payment, even though I assured myself it would only happen once. 3 days later, my dad called. Your brother's rent is due, and you are aware of how unforgiving these landlords can be. No pity for a temporary failure. Could you see him for once? It was the last time, I reminded myself, as another $1,200 was transferred from my account to Callan's. But the requests persisted. A new interview suit, groceries, and utilities were all portrayed as temporary, essential, and my family's responsibility. By the end of Callan's birthday, I had given him almost $3,000 in loans that we all knew would never be repaid. During lunch at work, I explained the situation to my coworker Leora. We were sitting in the business cafeteria when I said to her, it feels like I'm being punished for being responsible. They expect me to make up for Callan's shortcomings the more I succeed. Leora, who comes from a large, harmonious family, shook her head. This trend will continue until you are at your very end, Sarah, so you need to set boundaries. Clear, unequivocal borders. My chant, which had been ingrained in me since I was a small child, was repeated, but their family. Leora responded, families support one another's growth. They don't undercut it. They are exploiting you and supporting your brother, not demonstrating love. I knew she was right, but the dread of conflict was a product of years of brainwashing. That being said, I decided to start setting limits after Callan's birthday. No need to create drama during a family celebration, I said. The weekend before the celebration, I went shopping for Callan's present, and despite my frustration, I secretly hoped that a thoughtful gift might somehow bridge the growing distance between us. I chose an expensive watch, far more than I should have given the recent loans, since I wanted to make an unequivocal gesture. That evening, my phone was constantly ringing with texts from various relatives. My mother told me to remember Callan's favorite chocolate cake and to dress beautifully because your Aunt is coming from Portland. From my dad, your mother cares about this, so for once, be on time. From my cousin Rowan, we need to catch up and I hope to see you at the party. My uncle added it will be good to see the whole family together. You are missed at Sunday dinners. The subtext was clear. Attendance was mandatory and my absence had been acknowledged and discussed. The family structure was using its power to try to reintegrate the errant member. When I woke up the morning before the party, I was filled with anxiety, so I was extra careful to get ready, choosing a conservative blue dress that would prevent remarks about showing off or dressing fancy. I wore very little makeup, wore my hair simply, and deliberately left most of my jewelry at home. These calculations, this careful grooming of my appearance to minimize criticism, spoke volumes as I navigated damaging interactions. As I wrapped Callan's gift in silver paper, I rehearsed bland responses to the standard questions about my job, my penthouse, and my love life. I felt like I was regressing every mile of the 40-minute drive to my parents' suburban home, from the confident professional to the eternal second-best kid, seeking approval that never came. I parked between my uncle's SUV and my cousin's sedan, paused to collect myself, and then got in. The home was already packed when I arrived, with relatives, aunts, uncles, and friends of my parents celebrating Callan. Balloons decorated the living room, and a banner reading "Happy 35th Birthday" was hung above the dining room entrance. My mother stopped me at the door. "At last you're here," she said, despite the fact that I had come precisely on time. "According to my mother, your father and uncle are in the backyard with Callan. Place your present next to the others on the table." I went around the house and said hello to relatives I hadn't seen in months, most of whom were polite but distant, as if they didn't know how to treat me now that I had broken the unspoken rules of the family by becoming too successful. Aunt took my arm as I passed. "Is your relationship in that penthouse still going strong?" With a tone that suggested my choice to live there was a betrayal of my heritage, she asked. I told her bluntly it's ideal for me and moved aside before she could ask any more questions. "Thinks she's better than the rest of us now with her fancy job and expensive apartment," my mother's friend Celine said in the kitchen. She was my mother's buddy. Meanwhile, Callan can't seem to get a break. I pretended not to hear, focusing instead on arranging my brought-in plate of vegetables. It was a familiar pattern. My accomplishments were portrayed as arrogance and Callan's shortcomings as misfortune. In the backyard, chairs and dinner tables were arranged. Callan stood drinking a beer while our father, uncle, and two of our male cousins held court. When I arrived, he nodded quickly before continuing to talk about how his previous boss couldn't handle someone with real ideas. Sitting on the fringe of the crowd, I couldn't help but be in awe of the two worlds we lived in. Callan was a misunderstood genius who was continuously hurt by unfair situations and jealous authority figures, according to his account, which our parents enthusiastically endorsed. The version supported by empirical evidence said that he was a chronically impoverished adult who was enabled by parents who couldn't bear to see him suffer the repercussions. I never imagined that these disparate tales would be reconciled in a few short hours and drastically alter our family's dynamics. The birthday cake, the presents, and the seemingly routine family dinner were all merely preludes to a long simmering dispute. Dinner was served at 6 o'clock, and everyone sat around the long dining table, with a second folding table set up to accommodate the surplus. My mother made Callan's favorite dishes, which included roast beef, garlic mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and bread from the local bakery. At the head of the table, between my cousin Rowan and my father's colleague Jim, I was safely seated away from Callan. The conversation largely revolved around Callan's recent unemployment and swept over me. She went on, "I've been where you are. My parents financially abandoned me when I decided to go theater school rather than business college. My Aunt Laura, your mother, assured them they were right to do it. I had to learn my lesson," they said. However, Uncle Ambrose surreptitiously provided me cash for supplies and books. That was my dad's doing. I was taken aback. He had always appeared to be entirely in agreement with how my mother had treated me. Rowan remarked, "He's more complicated than he seems." However, he lacks strength. He will not challenge your mother or acknowledge Callan needs actual assistance, not just facilitation. Hours passed while we talked about our experiences as family misfits. Although not ideal, Rowan's relationship with her parents was now at least manageable after she had finally set limits with them. Distance was helpful, she suggested. I moved to Portland, restricted communication to plan phone conversations and in-person meetings, and avoided talking about some subjects. Although it was challenging at first, they now generally respect my boundaries. Knowing that at least one relative understood and was there for me made me feel less alone when I got home. I felt stronger for what I had to accomplish next because of that tiny affirmation. I methodically collected proof of my travels in comparison to Callan throughout the course of the next few weeks. I made a TI-SARA that detailed my education, which I paid for myself, as well as my professional development, financial achievements, and steady self-sufficiency. Callan history of dropped college classes funded by our parents, unsuccessful employment, unpaid loans, and continued reliance were all documented by me alongside it. I didn't make this record to embarrass him, rather I wanted hard proof to refute the deceptive claim that I had somehow gotten away with it while Callan suffered for no fault of his own. Callan made 2 additional attempts to enter my building during this period. The second time he claimed to have left his key upstairs and introduced himself as my brother to the concierge. He was turned away and told that if he came back, the police would be notified because of my new security procedures. My lawyer's cease and desist letter made a difference. There were no more threats of legal action and the social media campaign against me subsided. Nevertheless, relatives would occasionally text me to ask why I was tearing the family apart, or to be the bigger person. I was no longer as alarmed by these warnings as I used to be. I had acquired the skills necessary to identify manipulation techniques and react appropriately, sometimes by not responding at all with Dr. Mitchell's assistance. I felt strong enough to take the last step toward regaining my power 6 weeks after the birthday party incident. With the guarantee that security would be on hand in case of emergency, I set up a meeting with Callan and my parents in a private room at a downtown restaurant, which was a neutral venue. The scene was prepared for a confrontation that would either complete our separation or start a healing process. In any case, I was ready to deal with my family the way I wanted to, using limits as my armor and the truth as my shield. I needed time to gather myself before the confrontation, so I got to the restaurant 20 minutes early. I had reserved a private dining room which provided protection and solitude. My attorney, Jessica, had recommended a public location with staff close by in case things got heated again. I brought copies of the paperwork I had gathered and practiced my remarks with Dr. Mitchell in order to be well prepared for this meeting. Above all, I had made my limits clear, along with the repercussions for crossing them. My folks showed up just on schedule. My mother's face was a well-worn facade of damaged self-respect. Despite his discomfort, my father appeared determined. Callan made his arrival 10 minutes late, acting more like a power move than a simple act of disrespect. After a waiter brought water and left us alone, I started, "Thank you for coming. I wanted to have a face-to-face meeting to discuss some issues regarding our future relationship." "Are we going to continue?" my mother said. "Maybe you should begin by apologizing for ignoring our calls for weeks and leaving on your brother's birthday." Refusing to let anything get in the way, I inhaled deeply. What transpired during Callan's birthday celebration was intolerable. "When I denied your irrational requests, you attacked me with your hands, Mom. Nobody stepped in to help or inquired about my well-being afterwards." Callan sarcastically remarked it was just a slap. "Stop being so dramatic. It would have been assault if a stranger had slapped me." "It's not appropriate just because you're family," I said coolly. "However, today isn't about repeating the past. Setting up boundaries for the future is crucial." I put 3 copies of a document on the table after opening my folder. "I've made a TI-SARA that chronicles my path from college to the present. It covers all of the jobs I held to finance my studies, all of the apartments I occupied while saving for a house, and all of the promotions I obtained via diligence and extra skill building on my own time." My dad took a quick look at the paper. Without looking, my mother pushed it away. I went on, "In addition to my voyage, I've documented Callan's path, the 3 universities our parents funded, the many jobs that were lost or left unfilled, the ongoing financial assistance that was given without any expectation of accountability or repayment." "This is absurd," Callan yelled. "All you're trying to do is make me look bad and yourself look good." "No," I quietly said. "I'm gathering evidence to refute the claim that you've suffered for no fault of your own while I've somehow had it easy. The expectation that I should give up my house to accommodate you is the culmination of the use of that story to support more irrational demands. Anger made my mother's face flush. We never requested that you vacate your house, merely to share it for the time being. I answered, a distinction without a difference. After years of sacrifice and hard work, my home is my private haven. Nobody is entitled to insist on having access to it, family or not. Speaking for the first time, my father questioned, so what is this meeting really about? To demonstrate to us how much better you believe you are? No, I replied. It is to set clear boundaries for the future. On the table, I put another document. I agreed to these terms in order to maintain a relationship with each of you. The text was straightforward and easy to read. No more demands for Callan's financial assistance. No talk of my penthouse, no ideas about Callan residing there. Only polite conversation, no physical violence, verbal abuse, or manipulation. No surprise visits to my house or place of employment. Recognizing previous actions and resolving to adhere to these limits, we may gradually re-establish our friendship if these boundaries are upheld, beginning with sporadic phone conversations and working our way into quick public gatherings. I will instantly cut off contact for a minimum of 6 months if they are broken. The ensuing hush was deafening. As though I had grown a second head, my mother gazed at me. Callan gave a loud snort. My dad appeared distressed but not totally shocked. At last, my mother exclaimed, "This is ridiculous. Your family is us. You have no right to define how we should be loved." I clarified, I'm not prescribing terms for love. I'm creating guidelines for keeping in touch. There is a distinction. Callan said, so it's your way or nothing. I clarified, it's healthy boundaries or nothing. I'm only asking for basic respect and recognition of my autonomy, nothing more. With a tone full of contempt, my mother questioned, and if we refuse to sign this contract? I answered plainly, then until you're ready to respect these boundaries, we have no relationship. You have a choice. It was a tantrum of monumental proportions, just as Dr. Mitchell had warned me it would be. My mom broke down in tears. My father made an appeal to loyalty to the family. Callan would go from sulky quiet to angry tirades about my superiority complex. My mother changed strategies after trying to sway me emotionally without success. She threatened, don't expect to ever be welcomed back if you do this, if you cut us off. You'll regret sacrificing your family because of your egotistical pride. It was the real deal, the call to action I had been waiting for. Such a threat used to have me back in line since I was afraid of losing my only family, no matter how dysfunctional. However, I had undergone a profound change. I became acutely aware that what I was being offered had nothing to do with family. It was a deal where affection was contingent on obedience, a control mechanism disguised as kinship. I gathered my papers and got to my feet, saying, I hope it doesn't come to that. But I won't settle for anything less because I deserve to be treated with dignity. Even from relatives. Particularly from relatives. You now have the ball in your court. With my head held high, I left the eatery. I wasn't sure whether I would ever talk to my brother or parents again, but I was positive that I had made the correct decision for myself. The weeks that followed were challenging yet illuminating. Clearly expecting me to break first and come crawling back, as I usually had in the past, my parents didn't get in touch with me. Callan temporarily returned to his social media effort when a fresh complaint took his focus away. I focused my energies on developing closer relationships with those who actually cared about my welfare. Leora and Kaya grew even closer, and I joined a hiking group and a book club to broaden my social network. Rowan and I got back in touch, and she occasionally gave me updates on family issues without pressuring or criticizing me. Above all, I kept working with Dr. Mitchell to process the loss of family separation and create a more positive self-image that was not shaped by my position as the family scapegoat. My father unexpectedly wrote me an email 4 months after our encounter, using his personal account instead of the one my mother kept track of. Sarah, it started out easy. Since our meeting, I've been thinking a lot. Even while I disagree with some of what you stated, I acknowledge that we haven't always treated you fairly. Callan and your mother aren't prepared to accept this either. However, I wanted to let you know that I admire your accomplishments and the courage it takes to defend yourself. I'd like to speak with you alone sometime if you're open to it. Although it wasn't a full recognition, it was a beginning. I agreed to have coffee with him the next week, maintaining my strict boundaries but being cautiously optimistic. Callan also experienced a change around the same time, albeit it wasn't due to a significant realization about our relationship. He finally had to face reality as his main facilitators, our parents, were finally running out of resources and patience, and I, his secondary support, was firmly out of his reach. He moved into a small apartment with a roommate and accepted an entry-level job at a nearby retail establishment. I invited my chosen family, friends who unwaveringly backed me and accepted my boundaries, to a modest dinner party in my penthouse 6 months after the altercation. Kaya held up her glass as we sipped wine on the terrace with a view of the Seattle skyline. To Sarah, who showed us all what true strength looks like, she toasted. When everyone had gone later that night, I was alone myself on that same balcony, thinking back on the past year's voyage. There was more to the penthouse around me than just opulent real estate. It served as a reminder of everything I had conquered, every challenge I had faced, and every limit I had set. My parents and I continued to have a complex relationship. Slowly but surely, my father and I were re-establishing our relationship on healthier terms. A few timid approaches had been made by my mother, but she had not acknowledged her actions. I was relieved and saddened that Callan and I were still at odds. But I felt totally content with who I was for the first time in my life. I discovered that genuine family is characterized by unconditional love, respect, and support rather than by blood or duty. I had learned that standing up for what you believe in and demanding that your boundaries be respected can sometimes be the most compassionate thing you can do, both for yourself and other people. I came to the realization that the most valuable asset I possessed was not this stunning apartment, but rather the sense of self-worth I had worked so hard to restore as I watched the city lights sparkle below. Have you ever needed to establish challenging limits with relatives? What did you take away from the experience, and how did you respond to the situation? Please share your stories in the comments section below. In order to hear more tales like this one, please subscribe and like this one if it spoke to you. Additionally, please share this video with anyone you know who would benefit from hearing this message about establishing healthy boundaries. And that's the thing about revenge, it doesn't always come with fireworks or a dramatic mic drop. Sometimes the real power is in choosing peace, building the life they said you couldn't, and walking away without looking back. If you're carrying anger or betrayal, I hope you give yourself the gift of boundaries, healing, and growth. You don't have to prove anything, your peace is the proof. Have you ever been betrayed by someone close? How did you rise above it? Share your story in the comments, I'd love to hear it. Let's heal together.